Welcome to Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. This episode is sponsored by Springs Mental Health Summit, a summit for parents, teachers, neighbors, and friends to talk about mental health in our community. For more information, go to springsummit.org. Here's your host, Trever Shirin.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations today. We are so excited to be in studio with Julia, one of the therapists here on staff at Mayfield Counseling Centers. We love Julia. We think so highly of her. Definitely one of those therapists that I would send my kids to.
Yep.
So just a shameless plug for her. Thanks for being on the show, Julia.
Thanks, Trev.
Yeah, that's the thing. We have all therapists that we like, and we can't go see them ourselves.
I know, it's rough.
It's rough.
Today, Julia is going to talk to us a little bit about family of origin, and I think we should probably start by defining what that is.
So, like as we listen to, we get all this in our counseling field, right? I mean, our 2.5 years of education, by the end we're like, hey, family of origin, we get it. How would you describe that to somebody that has no idea what we're talking about, or kind of the those that are listening? They're like, okay, I kind of probably could figure it out, but like, what is it really?
Sure. Well, I'm not going to make any assumptions. I would say family of origin is kind of the group of people that you come from. So it's your parents, it's your siblings, it's the culture that you kind of were raised in. Whether, somebody is going to have a different family of origin that grew up in LA than somebody who grew up maybe with the same quote unquote type of family members in New York. So you might have a brother and a sister and a mom and a dad, but your life is going to look really different. And those cultural pieces add to your family of origin.
So we can't just look at a family and go, oh, that's a family that's, got the same makeup as the family sitting next to them. And so they share similar experiences, right? And they see things the right way. It's all based on the culture that is the family, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the tricky thing is that family of origin can go even past that. Did your grandma grow up in your home? Did you ever know your grandmother? Were you adopted into a family? And what is that family of origin? And you might not know your biological family, but you still are bringing in biological pieces that are a part of you that change the family of origin and that sort of thing as well. And so it can extend past the people who are immediately in front of you and go deeper into your ancestry, for lack of a better term.
For that individual who's adopted, is their family of origin the family they were adopted into, or was it the family that they were biologically came from, their ancestry that way?
Born of, yeah.
And then what does that look like for, a step further too, the kid who goes through foster care? What does family of origin look in some of those circumstances that aren't as clean cut as we'd like them to be?
Yeah, I think it's just that it's not as cut and dry when your story looks less conventional, I guess, than what we all kind of assume people's experiences are. So I would say that your family of origin is who you are raised with. But I don't think it's that simple. I think your family of origin is informed by the place that you come from. So if you are adopted, you are biologically bringing things into your family of origin, even though I think people would typically describe your family of origin as being the people that you were raised with.
So not your birth parents, even though the birth parents in an adopted situation, even though the birth parents pass along biological and genetic markers. When we're looking at family of origin, we're considering the piece that they're adopted, but when we're looking at the bigger picture of who they were raised with, where they were raised, how they were raised. Yeah. Is that I'm hearing you say?
Yes, that is what you're hearing me say.
And the answer to this is hopefully as simple as I think it might be. But why is it important that we know anything about family of origin?
I think the biggest thing about family of origin is that our families set the stage and kind of the standard for how we view the world. So as a woman, the first woman that I ever saw in my life was my mom. So she and the way that she was, her personality, her habits, her traits, her mannerisms, every one of those things spoke to what it means to be a woman for me, what it means to be a mom, what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a stay-at-home mom, not a working mom. All of those things were sort of established for me. And it's not until we start rubbing up against different families of origin where you start to recognize, oh, somebody does it different than my family does it.
So how does this play out in therapy? Like, I'm thinking there could be multiple applications for as a therapist that this could be very beneficial for. And that's my kind of the first question on that, and I'll add another question later. But like, why do we, I mean, you asked this a little bit, but why do we care? Like, why do we care as therapists and people coming into therapy that they might be asked this, or they should be asked this by their therapist?
Sure. Yeah. I see it as adding so much value because I think so much of who we are today is based on our experiences that we've had in our past. And so I might have really different experiences growing up in a rural area with a really big family, lots of cousins and siblings and aunts and uncles and grandmas. I'm going to have really different experiences than somebody else who might be an only child in a big urban city. And so I'm going to experience the world differently having those two types of families. You're going to experience those things differently. And so those things are forming really wonderful memories, but also some painful memories and painful experiences that we walk through. And those are often the reason why we're coming to therapy, is because of wounds or painful experiences that we have. And so as a therapist, I'm going to be super intrigued as to what is your family of origin? How did you grow up? What are the things that you experienced? Because that's going to help me to understand you and the way you experience the world better. And then it's going to help us as a client and therapist work together to pursue what health and wholeness could look like.
That's rich. I think we don't think about that as much. But here's the thing, like, you don't know what you don't know. And I think a lot of us that are in the counseling field, like, this was eye-opening, at least for me, and I'll speak for myself. It was eye-opening experiences going through my counseling master's degree, because I'm like, why are we not taught this stuff just in daily life? Because it's so impactful of how I parent, if I want to continue things or break cycles, or just get understanding of, like, why do I get mad about this, or how come I use tone, or it's all back to our family of origin. And I think as a society, we don't pay attention to that as much.
Absolutely.
We joke about it as I saw my dad.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Like, we think about it in that way, but things that he did that rather than find
Totally.
kind of do the exact same.
Yeah. I remember the first time that I really ever had to think about it was in my undergrad program. And I was actually taking a communications class, but we were challenged to think about, I think the prompt was like, why you are the way that you are. And for some reason, we were challenged to look at our family. And it was the first time that I realized I'm the youngest of 4 kids. And I started to have to ask questions of my family of, like, what was going on in the family when I came around. And it started to explain so much about my personality and my tendencies and why I am the way that I am. And I think it helped me relate to my family members better, because obviously I didn't know what was going on when I was born. But it helped me to understand other people as well. So I think it doesn't only have to inform our own experiences, but it can help us relate to our family members to understand, was your mom in a really low place when she got pregnant and had you? And so that might affect your relationship with your mother. Or had your family just moved to a new location, and so they didn't really have friends, so family was everything. So you have a really family-centric experience, So I think it can inform even more than just who we are or why we are the way that we are,
So how would you encourage our listeners, maybe they want to go to therapy to explore this, but maybe they don't have the accessibility to therapy. Is there any way we can explore this kind of stuff on our own that you would suggest without getting us into trouble?
I actually think it's pretty cool to start at the source, pending having a good and safe relationship with some of your family members. But I think it helps even just start asking questions, because our memories don't really start filling in until later in our lives, as little kids. And so asking a parent or a grandparent, what was it like when I came into the family? Or how did my presence change the family? Or tell me stories about this time. Or why does grandpa always do this? Or, when we start to learn about where our families came from and the jobs that they had and the experiences that they had in the world, it starts to piece together this bigger picture of, oh, okay, your grandfather grew up in the Depression on a farm. No wonder he hoards plastic bags because he was raised to utilize all the resources that he had, and we all just thought that was a funny quirk that grandpa had, but there's actually a rhyme and reason to why people do what they do. And so once you can start to fill in the gaps, I think that can help a little bit. Culturally, I think kind of researching your ethnicity or where your family came from or, ancestry.com, kind of find out who is your family and how far back can you trace them? And did they come over of their own will or did they have to come over? Or, all of those things I think can help us understand who we come from. And I think sometimes that can be hard. I don't want to make it sound like it's just this cheery, awesome, amazing, reading Rainbow moment where
for some of our younger listeners, that's a show from the 80s and 90s.
Oh,
Reading Rainbow is actually coming back on the Netflix, by the way, with LeVar Burton, which is really good.
Yeah. Well done, Netflix.
Yeah. But, sometimes I think we discover, too, the hardships that our family has walked through. And those things get passed along as well as our dysfunction gets passed down. And so you might start to learn, oh, that's why I get angry. My dad got angry. My grandpa got angry. My uncle got angry. That's a part of our family too. And so it's not the easiest information to discover, but I think it's so worth knowing because I think knowledge really is so powerful because when you don't know what you don't know, how can we do anything different? How can we be different?
I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you, there's probably a caveat to this. I'm glad you said it's not, just all exciting stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think, at least in my own journey, that it's that understanding and knowledge creates freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can understand, okay, this is why I struggle with this, or this is why this happened in my life, it doesn't allow for those pains to go away. We have to work through those on our own through therapy and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it creates that space to go, okay, I'm not crazy.
Totally.
It makes sense now.
Yeah, in a sense it normalizes it.
There we go.
So that but I don't think that's an excuse for us to accept it.
Sure.
Because it's normal. Because, all my family does it, so it's cool, I can just do it too. Because we're still accountable for our choices and the way that we live our lives and who we are as people in the world and the way that other people experience us too. And so if we can empower ourselves with knowledge, we can make different choices and actually be who we want to be in the world, not feel like we're trapped in a cycle of anger or addiction or whatever it may be.
And I think knowing what you've been given in your genes. I know my family on the maternal side, going up several generations, all the women had really severe anxiety or some sort of anxiety. And I can see it in my sisters and I can feel some of the residual effects myself. But being able to recognize it does do that normalizing thing of oh yeah, this is kind of normal for the family. Yeah. And anxiety medication is probably going to be something that all my sisters have to be on at some point. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I can recognize in myself, I have some of this. And so now I can start taking some steps before it gets out of control to take control of it, mm-hmm. to do something about it. And in a way that if I didn't know, I would be shocked by it. Yeah. And then I've heard plenty of stories of families who are struggling with something independently and then they come together and start saying like, oh, me too, or yeah, this person's been struggling with that for like 10 years, and there's this beautiful family camaraderie that happens once you're able to open that up, because a lot of families, they don't share that kind of information with each other. They're more autonomous in the way that they're interacting with each other.
Yeah, and I think so often we hear stories of people where it almost feels too little too late. Like, man, if I had just known that a couple of years ago, I could have X, Y, and Z, And so I love that concept of talking with your family, because it's choosing to let them in on your experience, and so it creates vulnerability and ideally connection with your family. But then there's also opportunity to share and to learn more about the people that you came from. We don't really get to choose that, and so to learn more about that and embrace the beautiful and the hard things about that, I think, can be empowering.
I think it goes back to what you're saying. I had a guy yesterday we were doing this community event at one of the high schools in town, and he said, this goes back to our white privilege conversation in season 1. He goes, I was born a white male, native English speaking in New Jersey, and he goes, I didn't choose any of that. It's what I do with it that really matters. And I think that's the same here, right? And is that we could have grown up in an amazing family, and it's what we do with that. Mm-hmm. We could have grown up in an alcoholic family.
Absolutely.
And it's what we do with that. So and basically it's this idea of not misusing. So what he was saying was not misusing the privilege that he was given. What we're saying here is not misusing either the privilege or the potential for becoming a victim. And victim mentality is blaming and going, everybody else's problems are affecting me, instead of this idea of, okay, makes sense. Now what do I do with it? How do I overcome? How do I push through? How do I change? And I don't know about you, so I know when I use this in therapy, I like the aha moments like come a lot faster than other things that we could do in therapy with our clients. Is that kind of your experience too, or is
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think once somebody can personalize something, it changes everything, because you can talk up one side and down the other about these ideas and the way they work, but until somebody actually can put meat on the bones of their own experiences, it's not going to make all that much sense,
One of my favorite things to do, and I haven't done it in a while with talking about family of origin stuff, is the genogram. Mm-hmm. And for those that don't know, a genogram is just basically like something you would do on Ancestry.com, tracking grandparents to parents. A little more detailed, because you're now picking up on relationship stuff. You're picking up on addictions or not addictions, abuse, not abuse, those kinds of things. And so it's a pretty in-depth process. And so I take my clients through it at times, and I don't say anything. I just let them look at it and go, now what do you see? And it's almost like, oh my. My grandpa was an alcoholic, and my dad was, and I struggle with that, or my mom and dad, or my grandparents, were in a loveless marriage, and my parents got divorced. Not, it's just like, oh my goodness, and we don't realize.
But the cool thing about that is they know their family better than we do,
sure.
And so, I mean, it's the whole concept of therapy in general. Like, I can't change somebody; they have to choose to change, and I will gladly walk alongside them and help facilitate opportunities, but they're the ones who have to do it. And so for you to sit there and draw it all out and connect all the lines and write everything down and then just show it to them, that's still them getting to do the work and getting to make the connections and getting to see, oh, here's this line, or here's every male in my family is a banker, from my great great grandfather all the way down. And so it's jobs, it's habits, it's character qualities, it's so many different things, but it all adds to why we are the way they are. And so I think it's cool to offer that to people instead of telling them, hey, I notice this, and this. Sure. Just let them see it.
And I think it's beautiful that we do this in counseling. We just provide an opportunity sometimes to reflect, something that we don't do very often or very well, or both. And family is a beautiful opportunity, because it's something that intimately, even if you don't think that you know it intimately. If there was no intimacy, in your family of origin, you still know it intimately because it's really personal for you. Nobody else knows it the way you do. And for you to be able to go back and reflect and think about the different relationship dynamics in what you know, and if you have the opportunity to explore the ones that you're not aware of, is a really cool opportunity that you can create on your own.
Yeah.
So, Julia, if somebody's listening right now, obviously if they're in Colorado Springs, give us a call, mayfieldcounseling.com, contact at Mayfield Counseling, something that you might want to have a therapist walk with you through, which is not a bad thing. But if we have listeners in overseas, we have listeners all over this country of going, okay, if I want to kind of do this on my own, I'm fairly healthy, I feel like I'm doing pretty good,
Yeah.
I might not need a therapist. Like, how would I start exploring this? Do you have any suggestions for them?
I think conversation with family is key. I'm a real visual and tactile person, so I would suggest like get a big whiteboard or pull out a piece of paper or something and start sort of drawing out who your family is. You might not know exactly what a genogram is, but create your own kind of map or brain dump of who your family is and kind of start to visualize in front of you what you see. I think getting it on paper, getting it in front of you can kind of help to start to see patterns and just consistency throughout your family. I know most places in the world have internet, so jump on there and start Googling your grandma's name and if you know that your family lived in Lawrence, Kansas, Google your grandfather's name in Lawrence, Kansas and see what pops up. Libraries are not very common anymore, but I know libraries are a place where you can go look up information. You can go find books on the house that you grew up in a neighborhood and who owned the house before you. And we have access to so much information now, more information than we ever did before. And so whether that's going to a library and getting a book because you're a tactile person, or Googling things, or picking up the phone and calling your grandma or your sister or whomever, I think gathering information is step one of what do I know? What do I know about my family? I know that when my dad gets home from work, he has this tone of voice and I should not ask him questions. I know that when my mom picks me up from school and she has a snack, that it's been a good day for her. I know, we know those things, kind of like you were saying, Trevor. There might not be this massive intimacy in your family, but you know the details intimately. And so if you can start to pull apart those details and then start talking to other people about it, that's when you start to see rhythms and patterns, and then you can go from there.
I also encourage our listeners to check out 23andMe or Ancestry DNA as a place to start. I mean, it's kind of it's a little bit of an investment, anywhere from $59 to like $89, but I did it and found out some really interesting things about my family, which explain a lot, right? Found out that I have some Eastern European, Jewish, and Middle Eastern.
Cool, yeah.
And it explains why my great-grandmother was the way she was, and I never figured that out until just now. So there's those kinds of things that we have a database now, whether that creeps you out or not. We have a database.
Don't think about it too much.
Don't think about it too much.
It is what it is.
But of our DNA, of going, okay, here's the regions where you're from. And then you can go back and study. So I have some grandparents that were from Lithuania, and that's where it was the Jewish capital of Eastern Europe. Well, I've got 8% Jewish blood. So that means something, right? And that meant something, and probably part of the reason that they immigrated to the United States because of persecution or what. I mean, so all these things play into family of origin. And I guess in some ways it's probably a low threshold way to start.
Yeah, and it can make history real.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a great way to dip your toe in the water, because sometimes I think it freaks people out to be like, what? I want to go to a therapist. I'm not screwed up. It's what I think there's stigma around therapy as it stands. And so even just a way to kind of talk through and discuss the family that you came from, I think is so informative. And even though I started going to therapy for something totally different, I think some of the most informative times in my own therapeutic experience was talking through why I am the way that I am, what I learned from my dad and my mom and my siblings, and being the youngest child, and all of those things contribute to it. And so it just feels a little less intimidating because we all have families and we all have roles in our families. And so it's kind of a normal place to start. And it's a great place to start.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julia. We so appreciate you and appreciate having you on the show. If you would like to search through your family of origin with Julia, you can find her contact information at mayfieldcounseling.com.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, go to mayfieldcounseling.com/candid conversations and check out our Facebook page, Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield.